Hello, everyone. After a little bit of technical challenges, we are finally live on YouTube with the October 27th edition of the NPM feedback triage meeting. Since this is our first time doing this, maybe we could start with some short introductions. I have not warned the team I was about to do this because I didn't think about it until just this moment. So apologies to all of them. So I'm Miles. I'm a product manager at GitHub. I work on NPM, and I'm one of the technical steering committee's members of the Node.js project. I sit on the chair group of TC39. You could say that I love and am addicted to JavaScript. I'll just go through the list in order that I see names. Brian, would you like to go next?
Yeah, right. Brian Clark. I head up the packages team at GitHub. I've been at GitHub 3+ years now, and previously Mozilla, so I kind of love JavaScript as well.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Darcy.
Hey, I'm Darcy Clark. I'm the engineering manager on the NPM CLI. No relation to Brian Clark, as far as I know. And yeah, happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Darcy. Next up, we have Edward Thompson.
Hey, I'm Edward Thompson. I'm also a product manager at GitHub working on NPM. I came over to NPM after GitHub acquired NPM. Before that, I was working on GitHub Actions, and before that, I was working on version control. However, I too have found a newfound love in my heart for JavaScript. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Edward. Next up, we have Marav.
Hi, I'm Marav. I'm the director of NPM registry. Also joined NPM after GitHub has acquired NPM, and super excited to be here.
And last but not least, Scott.
Hey, I'm Scott Dinsmore. I am a senior director for packages, pages, and NPM here at GitHub. And I went through and joined NPM after the acquisition, and happy to be here. Thank you, Miles.
Excellent. So we have a pretty full agenda for today, so we'll jump right in. For a little bit of context, last week we launched a new roadmap and feedback process. And so in an attempt to continue this streak of transparency, we're running our first triage meeting as a live broadcast. Our intent right now is to potentially do this bi-weekly, but obviously we're going to see how this goes, see how productive it is, and see how much incoming feedback we actually get. We may not need that kind of cadence. But for now, we're kind of just kicking it off. I went through yesterday and reviewed all of the discussions that have happened in the last week since we opened the feedback publicly, but we also had about a month of a private beta run as well. So we have a bit of a backlog here. To start, I kind of came up with a couple categories where we were seeing a lot of different discussion topics in a related area. And then we have kind of like additional topics that we can get into as well. To start, the first topic that I wanted to discuss was package metadata. So there were a number of discussions open requesting various metadata about packages. Some of these were focused on metadata that could be potentially like part of the pacument on the registry. That's the metadata format that is used to keep track of all the information about packages. Some of them were related to metadata or discoverability of data on the website. So I want to kind of dig into these. There's a couple different topics here. The first one is number 66, which is Npm Scores. So this was opened by BNB saying, historically, we've seen a lot of package score implementations. To name a few, npm s.io, which is used by NPM to surface the 3 metrics on npm.com right now. Node source certified modules is a product targeted at enterprises, which include various quality signals. Package phobia and bundle phobia, which are both focused on package size. Skypack launched a new product just yesterday on package quality score. And there's a number of different security tools that give score based on security. And then Lighthouse at a point shipped a tool, a scope to old packages that have good alternatives to help find alternative packages. So I think like one way of thinking about this kind of score, I was framing it almost like a credit score, and there's different agencies. There was feedback in here, both to the positive and the negative. There were some community members who felt that each of these different scores end up being quite opinionated about value. So for example, something about package size may not make sense if you just like zip the whole package, because the actual use of the package may only be using a subset of it, especially if it's shipping with like support for multiple environments. Some things that people value do not necessarily align. And so there are kind of two different folks who came in stating that they think scores may actually not be the best signal. I guess just to the group here, how do you feel about the idea of surfacing more scoring data about packages? And what kind of data do you think would make sense to surface if we were to?
That's an interesting question. So obviously NPM has its own scoring right now, which is basically the npms.io score, although not quite. There's actually a few subtle differences, but I don't think we necessarily need to dig into that right now. I'm okay with NPM having its own opinion, right? Instead of necessarily aggregating other people's opinions, I'm okay with defining our own. In particular, yeah, I think that the current scoring metrics that we use make sense. I'm not like super informed about each and every one of these things, but like a security score seems to make sense to me. I don't know that we necessarily need 4 security scores though. That does, I agree that that's starting to feel a little disjoint. It's hard to know what to really measure. If we think that we can get one really reliable score, I'd rather use that than 4 that we just pull in, I guess is what I'm thinking.
Is the score that we currently have used at all in package search or in any of the other features that we have on the website?
It's displayed. I'd have to check on search. I don't think so, but I could be very wrong about that.
It is used to filter. So that's one, or to sort. So that's one key thing here, which is bubbling up this information might help with people determining how they want to search and sort packages, right? So.
And so I'm looking at like the landing page for a module, and I'm not seeing
that
like, so
information doesn't live there,
okay.
unfortunately. Yeah.
But we already do have like some sort of score. Is it like a scale out of 100 or something, or like how does that work?
As far as I know, it is percentage based. Like, yeah. So if you go to any search page, you'll see little bars that are all defined by maintenance. The other two, and those are actually used. So if you click on one, they'll essentially search. So I think default search is alphabetical, alphanumeric sorting, and then you can sort by those extra criteria. So this is where like improvements can be made to discoverability, and I think that scores lend to that, or any extra metadata that we can like tack on to search would be really helpful. Like today, I don't know, it's like you can do a very broad keyword search for all the information that we have in the document, which is nice. But at the same time, like it'd be nice to have some of that extra metadata for let's say security score, like to do sorting, right, or whatever it is.
So for those following along at home, or even those on the call who don't have search open, the three metrics that are measured are popularity, quality, and maintenance. So it seems to me like a first step that we could do, and one of the things that we're talking about is potentially doing, and it doesn't need to be a radical, but like some sort of redesign of the package landing page to surface more information that we already have available. So it seems like surfacing this popularity, quality, and maintenance score information on the like landing page of a package could at least be like an iteration. Darcy, do you know if there was historically a reason to not include that on the package landing page?
No. And I think it was a backlogged item that was already poked. I think Ed might have got poked about this online recently. I could be wrong. I think I remember seeing a discussion. I don't know why we never pulled it in. It could be that this, again, like our search historically was a fork of NPMS. And so the two systems may just like we were not trying to pull information out of that system maybe. We also did have some troubles last year with indexing, which yeah, I'm not sure if they've gone away, but that was definitely, there was some improvements needed to search and how we actually got that information, like how do we actually generate the popularity score, the quality score, and maintenance score. That is all derived from GitHub information, as far as I know, like that, the way that that's determined is all by activity on your Git repo and things like that. So yeah.
Okay, but at least to me, it seems reasonable to say, hey, we already have scores that we're keeping track of. And it's probably better for us to double down on the infrastructure and stuff that we have in place, as opposed to like picking a number of other scores.
Well, it might be an opportunity also to look at like, are those accurate today? Because we have gotten also feedback in the past where do these three buckets actually make sense, and does this do the doubling down on them and just surfacing on package page, I don't know if it's even very helpful. Like I'm not sure many people know they can even search by these three extra pieces of information.
Yeah, I second that, Darcy. I think it's not very clear that you can actually search by these parameters. And I think the second thing that you said is like we should invest in making these more accurate and better quality of the numbers that we're seeing. That's probably going to be much more beneficial for users, and I'm sure that the impact will be much bigger, even with just doing those little fixes for customers.
I agree.
I guess one last tidbit of information there. I know historically we even considered removing them. So that's how little kind of like, at least previously, we didn't have a lot of faith that people were using this, like the sorting. Like we could probably get the data to figure out how many people actually use those to sort their search results by, to see if it's even useful today. My guess is not that many people use it. And I think we could probably do a better job, like as we figure out what kind of information we do want people to be able to discover packages by, and whether that's a security score, or whether that's a maintenance score, or whatever we define, then maybe that's like we reintroduce that back into search. And
I guess
package pages. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, it also seems like some of these metrics might, like, we may want to also just like revisit what the categories we have are. So like quality and maintenance, for example, like I think about something like security, and security is something that could fall into both of these, but like, I don't know that security is something we want to bar on, because you can't really say like this package is definitely secure, but like we can talk about like, what is the quality of their security program, or what is the quality of their security maintenance? I think like there's also things to be said. I know like packages in the ecosystem are not doing this as much, but like, I think Express is one project, for example, that kind of does like LTS kind of stuff. I think Fastify recently launched an LTS program, but maybe we could come up with something even like a little bit more simple as an algorithm, like how on the GitHub page you have like these checkboxes of like, do you have a code of conduct? Do you have a README? Like just kind of like a community score that you get that doesn't require like really intense algorithms. It's just like, do you do these like X things? But it seems like digging, like without getting too verbose, digging into these scores that we are keeping and improving the quality of the existing ones and then surfacing that data seems like a really good exercise that we could do and useful to the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that that's a good first step, and I think I think what you just described is an excellent second step, Miles. I would love to know, for example, that a package that I depend on, all of the maintainers have 2FA enabled, for example. That seems really valuable.
I feel like those are checklists though, and not necessarily scores. Like has or has not, X, Y, and Z versus like the X, Y, and Z culminate to a percentage of quality or security. I think it's a bit dicey when you get into the scoring, like, which is why I think Jordan Harbin, who gave that kind of like feedback about scoring, I think that's what he was alluding to. It's like,
but I think with that being said, and then I am going to suggest that we move on to the next topic for the sake of time. Scores are subjective, but we also, as the maintainers of the registry, like need to be a little bit subjective about like what we consider quality on the registry to a certain extent. So it's like, and I guess maybe this could be part of the advantage of including other scores, would be that like we may introduce our own bias that may not align with what other sources think about. So that like linking out at least to maybe some other scoring systems or having a page that documents like our process and like other sources of other information may be like a good complement to this, to at least own the fact that like this information may be biased, but it's our bias. Like we're okay with that because you need to have an opinion. Otherwise, like we're all just kind of not doing anything. The next topic that we have here is definitely, I think, a little bit more straightforward. It's add TypeScript type information to an NPM packages page and ideally in the search index. There's an example specifically of how Yarn surfaces this data. So in the Yarn search, at the very least, if something has type information, there's a little TypeScript icon next to the name of the package in the search bar. And then there was also an ask that if it does have type information to like have a link to the relevant DT package if it's available. And so someone pointed towards a site that is able to verify whether or not something is definitely validated. I think that there's enough TypeScript stuff that's out there that this might be worth examining. I think like the only concern would be, like from my position, is that there's a number of different like other syntaxes that folks can use that isn't just TypeScript. It could include like JSX, or it could include like, I don't know, there's a number of others, but I think like, especially as time has passed, TypeScript has definitely like converged as its own like dialect and island on the registry. Do folks have any strong feelings about this?
not really. We've discussed adding this information to the document, which is what Orta referenced as well in this, so that you could fetch and create a label or create UI based around that information. So like, I think that's where you have to start, is like, are we okay with adding that information into the registry, like registry docs, which is documents. And as you alluded to, we also had the conversation about, does this increase the scope and what's next? Like years ago, we could have supported like a coffee script, like a privileged, like coffee script, like association and any other like potentially like source indicators, like this is TypeScript package, this is JSX is in this package, you know, like as you say, like there could be a whole bunch of keys. Yeah.
So this actually leads directly into one that we have a little bit later on the agenda, which is making it easier to identify the format of a package. So maybe we can re-pick up that specific one, which like actually, for lack of turning this into like the slippery slope logical fallacy, like I think that there are actually enough islands that are carved out on the registry that starting to collect that, including maybe even CoffeeScript, may not be a terrible idea. Just because like there was a really great article a couple months ago about like a non-JavaScript developer coming and trying to get started with JavaScript, just having a terrible time because they like followed the instructions in a README, which told them to just install and import something. But like they were using Node, that did a version of Node that didn't support ESM, and the package just like directly published TypeScript. And it was just like completely unclear how to even get started. And this is the kind of thing where like more data can help, but let's stay focused on the types. Yeah.
One question in the scope of this specific one. So we're saying adding, if we decide to talk about this more about the documents, the expectation here is that we identify if there's a TypeScript package used and we add it to the document, or while publishing, customers can kind of give that information.
While publishing, it would be a field that gets carried along. So yeah, there wouldn't be any like stat code analysis to be done on the registry side. There's no way that we're going to go back. Historically, there has been times when we've gone back and analyzed packages for various reasons. But no, this would be that on publish, you're providing that indicator. And it's a blessed field that actually gets stored.
But I think that, oh, go for it, please.
The thing that I think is interesting is like, I mean, I think that there's two ways to look at this. And the first one is like, Miles, what you said, the source of the package. But the second one is like, I have another package that has interesting metadata that you are going to care about if you're a TypeScript user. And I don't remember that existing in CoffeeScript. I remember CoffeeScript, it's been a bunch of years, transpiling directly to JavaScript and not leaving like hint files around that would be useful for other CoffeeScript users. Is that?
So like source maps is a good example of like where this is. So that's like, you're right that it could directly transpile, but a lot of people shipped CoffeeScript directly, right? So like, and would expect that you'd be transpiling as the consumer. So that's where like potentially like, you know, references to source maps and like, yeah.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing here that's worth digging into though, and Marab, I think that you are butting up against it, and I don't know that I am as definitive as Darcy on this, where it's like we can solve from an engineering capacity. This could be solved either through like additional explicit metadata in the package JSON that we look at and put in the document, but it also could be done via static analysis. One would be backwards compatible, one would be forwards compatible. There's also kind of like this ongoing race to just shove more and more data into the package JSON that we may or may not want to do. There are ways that we could likely derive this statically from the package JSON, even just using existing information. I don't think that this is a great heuristic, but like a naive one could be like, is TypeScript a dependency? Is there a file that's like a .d.ts? Like there are heuristics that we could do to surface this without requiring like manual intervention from the developers. And also we could in theory write like a follower to go over the registry and update. I think also where this data lives, like could be a big one as well. So like we render the READMEs the way that we render the readmes, for example, is like a processing step that happens on publish. Like if we wanted to store that type information and make it visible, that make more sense to be like kind of like a processing step. I will avoid getting too into the weeds on this.
So
yeah,
I think the processing step breaks down though. The processing step is fine if you're building a TypeScript package and publishing it. The processing step breaks down if you're building a JavaScript package and publishing it, and somebody else has built TypeScript, the d.ts around that for you. So we'd have to follow the other direction as well.
But I guess that's an interesting one that like maybe speaks to the Pachyment approach, because just because someone made TypeScript bindings for my package doesn't mean I bless them or want them linked to from my package on the registry.
I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
so like if I were React, I would want to say, these are my TypeScript definitions. Use them if you want. I don't really maintain them. Somebody else does. So I haven't pulled them in, blah, blah, or I don't use TypeScript, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess, and we'll get to the other one later, hopefully, if we have time, like the TypeScript type information one may be actually different than like the identifying a type of a package one, because it is uniquely identifying like an external resource versus like, because a package could be identified as a TypeScript package without without like knowing what the bindings are, or like where the types, not bindings, where the types are located.
Yeah,
okay.
I think they're different.
Does anybody else want to talk about this one, or we get to go to the next? Okay, so the next one that we have on here is show package usage by version. So right now, for package usage on the landing page, we just show like all downloads. Comparatively, if you go to like the cargo site for certain crates, crates.io, which is the Rust package manager, and you look at a thing, it will actually show not just total download counts, but downloads per particular version. This information is particularly helpful for maintainers, because you can make educated decisions like there's a security vulnerability that was just discovered. Which Semver major lines should I spend time patching or backporting? We don't really surface that information at all for people. So I think from a design perspective, it probably would not be that difficult to figure it out. We have prior art that we could point at. I think the question would actually be more maybe to the registry about like how hard it would be to get this information. Like, is that something that we could glean today with the way that things are stored, or would we need to kind of change the way we're doing internal analytics?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I'll let Merav speak to the difficulty. I think it's not there, but would need some rework, but she can confirm that.
Yeah, we'll have to do some rework around our current data. I can't say right now exactly how much work that will take, but there will be some work to actually get this data, because we don't have it something right now.
But yeah, this feature totally makes sense to me, and I want it too.
Selfishly, I just want it for the NPM CLI, like.
Yeah.
So that one thing with download count, associating downloads to the package in which they were downloaded by is that so this is kind of tough, and I think Isaac spoke to this in again in a thread somewhere online, but the concept of like Semver ranges it gets a little bit interesting when you're nailing down which exact version of a package is depending on or is responsible for the download of that specific package gets a little dicey unless you're passing along like yeah, I was trying to think through this the other day, and I think there's a lot more. I don't think it's going to be a one-to-one. I don't think it's going to be super accurate, and I think there's a lot of like issues with doing it.
I guess the thing that I would push back on that is like I think it comes down to granularity, and how and like there's a slider here that we could turn. So it's like right now it's just everything's in one bucket, and
Sure.
that's useful to know. Hey, this package is being used. I think that we could tweak it slightly, and it doesn't mean that we don't store more granular information internally, but just the Semver major. Like if we think about NPM, how many people are installing NPM 6 versus how many are installing NPM 7? Like just that additional amount of granularity is a ton of extra information that like you don't need to worry about the ranges. You don't need to worry about the specific version. Like most ranges are locked at the very least to the major. And when I think about like a security release, for the most part, like most people, not saying everyone, but most people would care like I can get a security update without having to do a Semver major breaking change to my dependency. Most places, and we could probably do some actual statistics, but many places that I see, people are more likely doing the like arbitrary upgrades of Semver minors rather than locking to a particular minor. Again, I'm not saying this is perfect, but it's at least better than what we have today. And if we think about like the internal infrastructure changes that we would need to make, I feel like that granularity, like we maybe would just keep downloads for everything, but I won't get too into the weeds. But like, I think even displaying more than that might get like really confusing, especially if something has a lot of publishes. But do you not think that that information would be useful, Darcy?
Oh, I think it'd be super useful. It's just like you're trying to recreate like the dependency resolution, like on the server side, like
Oh, so for what it's worth, this isn't how many dependents. This is just, I was thinking pure download counts.
like
So just
download
install.
counts with a version. Oh yeah. Okay, so just with a specific version, that's fine. I thought this was leading to dependence. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously if we could like surface all the dependency information, that would be really useful for folks too. But I think that you can glean a lot of that just from download counts close enough for like a fraction of the effort. So that was specifically what I was imagining we would do. So right now we have that download bar that's just everything and just split them up. And like, honestly, we even really could, if we wanted to dig into it, like make that more searchable, like show everything, split by majors, show just a major in the specific versions. Like we could get really clever with it if the data is available.
Yeah, sorry, I was conflating the two. That was my fault, because they've often been, people ask for one, they immediately ask for the other.
Okay, so I guess a question to the room on this one, like I particularly really, actually, let's not get into that because we haven't really talked about which ones we want to do or not do. Let's just get through the list and then maybe think about it. So the next one that we have up on here is show bundle phobia or similar browser size stats. So this is, and for what it's worth, like I asked the person who opened this discussion if they felt that it was like sufficiently covered by the NPM score issue and could be closed as a dupe. And they specifically requested that this be seen as a separate topic. So they're talking about like package size very specifically, so not broader scores. They pointed towards a project called Bundle Phobia that you can type in the name of a package on Bundle Phobia, and it will tell you both the bundle size, minified and gzipped, and an estimate of the download time for it. There was comments in here that some folks don't find that this bundle size information is particularly useful, that it creates unnecessary FUD where people don't want to download certain packages because they think they're too big. And there's lots of ways. There was one pretty excellent post in particular that you know, I don't love the current metric displayed on package size, unpack size, because it doesn't take nuances like a library having multiple exports into account. And because the gzip size dependency count is ultimately what's going to matter much more for install time. And they also said, I don't know if bundle phobia is the answer, but I'd love to see a metric that better than unpack size, one which doesn't penalize library authors for having both CJS and ESM exports and takes into account the dependency graph. For me, and I don't know if other people feel that way, is like we've just talked through like a bunch of other things that we could do to have improvements, some of which are more opinionated than others, but doing size accurately with so many different heuristics that need to be kept in mind, to me seems like really fraught and difficult. And if we talk about like effort versus reward, it feels like very high effort, lower reward compared to something like the TypeScript example, which is like low effort, high reward. So for myself, it's not that I don't think that this is something that we should explore. It's probably just not something that I would personally prioritize in a first pass here. But I guess something that we could do, if we double down on our own scoring, we could decide if something like this is something that could affect our score. And if we had like a page where we talked about documenting our process and ideology behind scoring, we could link to something like bundle phobia or other tools that people could use for looking at bundle size, and likely explain why we're not including that in our score.
I would say I agree with you, speaking broadly. Yeah, I don't want to pull this in. I don't think I don't think we are quite there yet with the number of variations, everything you just described. I totally agree with. Yeah, I would rather see, I'm going to contradict what I said earlier. I would almost rather link out to bundle phobia as well. We need to think through that. This is not the, I think that we can make some better wins with our engineering resources, our scant engineering resources. You know, we can only do so much at a time, and I think that TypeScript is more valuable. I agree.
So just to be mindful, bundle phobia is what Yarn uses on their package pages to show size. And the information we showed today, I know you quoted Ben Coe's quote or feedback there, Miles. The information we use today like exists in the registry either way. It lives in the document. So it's not as though we're trying to penalize anybody by showcasing that information. Again, it's less of a score, and we don't use that to filter and or sort search results. So again, it's people can use that information as they want, and that's maybe, you know, what this person is asking for. They're not necessarily saying like use this to like penalize people, but some users use this information to determine right or wrong whether or not they want to pull in a dependency. And I think that you know, that's just a decision we want to make, like whether or not we want to give those people that information. So the reason why we do have zipped versus unpack size today is just because that information already lived in the registry. So if you want to find it, you were going to find it. So that's the historical context for why we show that today. And then in terms of the bundle phobia discussion, while Yarn's doing it, should we match what they're doing? That's potentially where we can discuss. Like,
yeah, I think to me, independent of like whether we should do it or not, it feels like one of the things that should bundle in with our own scoring ideology if we decide to include it as part of our own algorithm. And if we do or if we don't, like I think something that could be really good as part of working on the scores is like documentation about how we do the scoring, likely with like an outline of like what our process is, maybe even like directly the algorithm itself that we choose, and including documentation of like other scoring metrics that people use. So like that's a place where we could link out to bundle phobia, but I don't know if we want to just include like every like bundle phobia or other third-party scores on the landing page. I think if we land somewhere where we're like, we'd like to have a bunch of other scores on the landing page, kind of like end credit scores kind of thing, then maybe bundle phobias could be bundled in there. But like that seems like it needs to be part of like a broader holistic conversation and not just like unlike something like TypeScript. That's just clearly like something that we should surface, in my personal opinion. This seems like it needs to be part of that broader scoring conversation. Okay, cool. So the next one, make the repo for a package more prominent. We don't even really need to dig into this one too much. We already actually have it on the roadmap. This was a request from Cassidy, who's just saying, hey, like one of the first things I care about when I look at a package is like, what is the website and what is the repo? And that information is kind of buried. And so I did like a super quick mock-up in there of like, hey, well, like we could put it to the top here. And Cassidy was like, yeah, that's great. And then Ed and I put it on the roadmap. I feel like this is kind of part of maybe a broader redesign of the package landing page, and just like kind of like if that was an epic, this would be one of the work items there, or something that we would kind of like have a request if we worked with design of like, hey, this is information that we think should be more prominent. Does anyone have any specific feelings about this or thoughts, anything more than just let's do it?
Let's do it.
Cool.
I think we should just unbundle it from like thinking about a redesign or anything. Let's just go do it.
Okay, so yeah, like yeah, because I guess with the scoring stuff and even the TypeScript stuff, there's a bunch of like internal registry things that we need to do first, whereas this one can just like probably be iterated in like a day or two. Famous last words from a product manager.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that.
I love saying that and following it up with famous last words. That's my jam. So the next one that we have on here, and we're probably not going to get through anything other than this package metadata today, but make it easier to identify the format of a package. This is one that I opened initially, and it's like just some examples of things we may want to identify are like, is it a browser package? Is it a node package? Is it a plugin for like specific tooling like ESLint, Webpack, or Rollup? Is it TypeScript? Is it for an extension for like a particular framework or plugin or like a component for Angular, React, Vue, Express? There are a number of different ways of doing this through like different heuristics, whether it be information in the package JSON or a static analysis of the code. I think just kind of in general here. Oh, and Jason Develop It also had some more of like, it would be great to surface descriptive information about a package's exports. This is package.exports is like a newer feature from Node, but like you can glean a lot of this information directly from there and directly from some more of the metadata. And then Brad Meck said it would be, what would be the behavior for packages that have multiple entry points? What is the intent for non-standard syntax? So it's like trying to kind of figure out all the edge cases. I think that this request is maybe a little bit more, I don't want to say overwhelming, but just like really broad, could be anything versus like the TypeScript one that is very specific. And I could say like another specific one here would be like, can we determine 100% that a package has like a CJS entry point, or can we determine 100% that it has like an ESM entry point? And there's a couple of these heuristics that we definitely could do. So do folks have any strong feelings about this?
I kind of feel that if we want to go in this direction, we should probably focus on one, like let's say TypeScript should be the first one, and to kind of get the heuristic of like how that is going to look like and what we want to do there. And then on top of that, to add more other types that we want to support in that sense, if we go this route.
So
I
guess
sorry, just real quick. The thing that strikes me about this is this feels like a good prerequisite to the bundle phobia one, like knowing that this is a browser-based package makes bundlephobia a lot more valuable than knowing that it runs in node, I don't know, node 6 or something, right? Where you don't even want to run the package, let alone run bundlephobia on it.
I think with that in mind too, it's like there are different axes that we could look at this as well. Like there's runtime versus syntax, which are like two completely different things. So it's like the target being node versus the target being browser, or the target being universal. That information is useful for like, where do I run my code, versus like, this is Webpack, or this is rollup, or this is TypeScript, is important from like, what tooling do I need to consume and use it, which is also different from like, this is like a Vue plugin versus this is an Express middleware, or like is useful for like, why would I care to use it? So like there are kind of like a number of different axes here. And so I guess like one that I would say I think is worth maybe prioritizing early would just be ESM. Like this package supports ECMAScript modules or not. And the only reason I'm saying that is like, I think that if we're gonna jump through hoops to make it easier for people to identify that something is TypeScript so they know how to use it properly, I think on the flip side, it would be very good for us to say, hey, this is like a vanilla standard module that you could just run. I feel like those two bits of information are complementary and useful for like two very different similar use cases. But the like, knowing that something's TypeScript also kind of lets you know out of the box, like, oh, maybe I can't actually use this without tooling. But like, if something published TypeScript, but also published like a pure ESM entry point, that also lets you know, oh, it has types, but I don't need TypeScript to run it. So it's actually complementary information. But I also think that there's a lot of ecosystem tooling that's building on top of the registry, even Skypack, that really cares a lot about, is this thing ESM? Can I just use it without any tools? And with that, we're at time. I guess we can debrief a little bit more. We didn't get to the last one here, which I think is out of scope anyways. It was my issue about making it easier to identify system access required by a package. So it's like really in-depth static analysis. I think that this would be, again, like a later one. I would like to just to wrap, before we like stop this, I feel fairly confident personally that I would love to do an epic this quarter around improving package metadata and improving the landing pages for packages on the website, and start kind of prioritizing some of these work items based on that. So I don't think that we need to make a decision today. I'm just kind of stating a personal opinion. But I think what we could do over the next week, which would be great, and then drop into some of these issues, would be kind of try to reach consensus of a team if that is a work area that we want to prioritize this quarter. And if so, start like figuring out the epic and the particular features that we'll focus on, and start like getting those into the queue now, because we should work on it. Does anyone have any closing thoughts before we stop the stream? Cool. I'm checking the chat right now, and it doesn't look like anyone said anything. So I think with that, we can go ahead and stop the stream. If you're watching, thank you so much for watching. If you are watching later, thank you so much for spending your time on this. We appreciate all of you.